These are your Unit 1A Day 11 notes. In this video, you are going to practice ordering integers on a number line. In order to do this accurately, you are going to have to convert fractions to decimals and think about what we learned at the beginning of this unit about the value of positive and negative numbers. So the first most important thing to remember is when comparing numbers, one of the easiest ways to determine their order, which is from smallest to largest, is to convert them into decimals. It's much easier to work with decimals than it is to work with fractions and decimals. So what we're doing here, the directions, is using this number line. We're going to place these numbers in order from least to greatest. So your first step will be to make sure that all of these are in decimal format. I look here, and I have my first one is 7/10, and 7/10 is in decimal format. So I'll leave that the way it is. Next, I'm going to take 7/10 and I'm going to put it on the number line because it is already in decimal format. Well, I know that the starting is 0, so that means that it's somewhere between the number 0 and 1. And because it's 7/10, I know that it's over halfway, so it's just a little bit closer to 1. So this is my 7/10. Okay. Let's look at the next one. Here we have -5 and 1/10. That is already in decimal format, so I do not need to convert it to a decimal. I just need to put it on the number line. So we have -5 and 1/10. So we know that it's between -5 and -6. The difference between positive and negative numbers is I have this number right here. That tells me what the farthest whole number is to the right. When it's a positive, the number in front tells me the farthest number it is to the left. So you can see we have a 0 here. So that meant it was between 0 and 1. We have a -5 here, -5 and 1/10. That's between -5 and -6. And that's -5 and 1/10. Perfect. Moving on to the next one. We have 7/5. Now 7/5 is a fraction. Our first step always is we want to convert our fractions to decimals. Well, how do we do that? We take our numerator, 7, and we divide it by our denominator, 5. So in your calculator, you would type 7 divided by 5, and you would get an answer of 1 4/10. On the number line, it's a positive number. It's a positive 1 4/10. So I know it's between 1 and 2 because it's a little bit more than 1. Just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on my number line. It's not perfect, but it will help us put these numbers in order from least to greatest, which is the purpose of this activity. So 1 4/10, or 7/5, goes right there on the number line. So you see how I wrote 7/5 here and not 1 4/10? When you're putting these numbers on the number line, you're going to use the original form it was in. So that's why I put 7/5 here, but we converted it to 1 4/10 so that we know where to put it on the number line. Okay, we move to the next one. We have 6 3/10. Well, we know it's a little bit more than 6. So it's between 6 and 7, and it's 3/10, so it's just a little bit less than halfway between 6 and 7, right? And that's 6 3/10. All right, perfect. Let's move on to the next one. So we've done this one, and we've done this one. Now we have 7 and 0/10, so just straight up 7. We should be able to put that on the number line pretty easily. Right there, 7. Okay, moving on to the next one. Here we have negative 19/5. So again, this is a fraction, so our first step is to convert this to a decimal by taking the numerator, negative 19, and we're going to divide that by the denominator, 5. Negative 19 divided by 5 is equal to negative 3 and 8/10. I'll find that on the number line. It's negative 3 and 8/10 because it's 8/10 because there's something here. I know it's more negative than 3, so it's between negative 3 and 4. And it's 8/10, so it's a little closer to the 4, negative 4, than it is the negative 3. And this was originally in fraction form, so I'm going to write the fraction there, negative 19/5. Next one, negative 8 and 5/10. This is already in decimal form, so I can go ahead and just add it to the number line. It's negative 8 and 5/10, so we find negative 8, and now we know it's between negative 8 and negative 9 because it's a little bit more negative than negative 8. And remember, as we move to the left on the number line, the numbers get smaller or more negative when they are after 0. But now I'm going to go back to what I was doing. Negative 8 and 5/10, find negative 8. It's 5 more tenths, negative. It's right in the middle between negative 8 and negative 9. Negative 8 and 5/10. And our last one right here is we have 16/2. Again, that is in fraction form, so our first step is to convert it to a decimal. 16 divided by 2, and that is equal to 8. So I would go on my number line, and I'd find 8 right here. And that would be 16/2, and I'm writing it as 16/2 is because that was what it was presented as in the problem, this fraction. All right, so now I'm going to put these in order from least to greatest, and you can see that putting them on this number line really makes this process a lot easier. You can just see where they are, and you know as the numbers move from left to right, they get larger. So the numbers get bigger as they move this way on the number line, and they get smaller as they move this way down the number line. So all I'm going to do now is look at my number line and simply copy the numbers on here. So first I have negative 8 and 5/10, and I had negative 5 and 1/10, negative 19/5, 7/10, 7/5, 6 and 3/10, 7 and 16/2. Okay, putting these in order from least to greatest was significantly faster after putting them on the number line. Let's move on to the next page. All right, on this page we have 2 problems that are similar to what we did on the other page. What I suggest you do is follow the steps that I did. We look and we see if it's a decimal. This is 5 and 1/10. We find where 5 and 1/10 goes on the number line. I know it's between 5 and 6. So I put my dot there, and then I label it 5 and 1/10. Done. We also even put a little check there to say I'm done. Next, we have negative 4 and 2/10. So I go to negative 4, and I know it's more negative. It's got that 2/10, so it's between negative 4 and negative 5. And it's 2/10, so it's closer to that negative 4. And then I make sure to label it, because this labeling is really what helps you put them in order from least to greatest. If you just have a dot here and you did not label it, it's pointless. It's not going to help you put them in order. So make sure that you're putting the number above the dot once you've located on the number line. Okay, I'll do this last one. Here we have 8/5. Remember, this is a fraction, so my first step is to do 8 divided by 5. And I put that into my calculator. And 8 divided by 5 is equal to 1 6/10. So I'll go ahead and I will find 1 6/10 on the number line. I know that it's between the numbers 1 and 2 because when I'm looking at positives, this number determines the number farthest to the left. So it's between 1 and 2. And it's 6/10, so it's a little bit over halfway. And then again, when I label it, I'm going to label this point 8/5 because that was the starting point. Okay, so I want you to have this in your notes, and you should have the stuff from the other page in your notes too. I don't think I remembered to have you guys pause the video and did that. So if you have not done that, go back and write those down. All right, now here we are, and I want you to complete this problem. You're putting the numbers in order from least to greatest, and you're using this number line to help you. So your first step is you want to put all of these numbers on the number line and then put them in order from least to greatest. So go ahead, pause the video, and try on your own now. Okay, hopefully you got these done on your own and you had the same order. So in least to greatest, we have -8 7/10. Remember, that's between the 8 and the 9. -4 2/10, between the 4 and the 5. -33/10. So this is a fraction, so we converted it to a decimal by taking -33 divided by 10. We get this answer of -3 and 0.3 repeating. Go ahead and just put that little repeating sign over it if you'd like. And we know that that's between -3 and -4 because it's more negative than -3, so it has to be between that number and the number to the left, which is 4. Next, we have 8/5, and 8/5, when we do 8 divided by 5, that was 1 6/10. This is 1 6/10. Then we have 5 1/10, 5 1/10, 6 4/10. 6 4/10 is probably should be a little bit closer to the 7 than it actually is here. And then we have 9. And last we have 20 halves because 20 divided by 2 is 10. So that goes right there. Right? Hopefully you did these correct and you're ready to move on to the next and last problem. So here what you're going to do is the same thing you've been doing, is you're going to put the numbers on the number line and then order them from least to greatest. Remember, the more negative a number is, the smaller it is. So the more you move to the left on the number line, the smaller the number gets. Okay? And then you move to the right on the number line, the more positive a number gets. And that's why when you have a number like this, -2 and 4/10, you find your -2, and it's 4/10. So it's more negative than -2. So that's why you have to look to the right to label that. All right, so your job right now is to pause the video and do what we did on the last two problems. Convert your fractions to decimals, put all the numbers on the number line, and then order them from least to greatest. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to complete these problems and you did them correctly. The 3 fractions should have been converted to decimals. All of the numbers should have been put on the number line. And then using the number line, you put the numbers in order from least to greatest. Something that I want you to be aware of is these last two numbers. We have 7 7/10 and 7 8/10. So that's these two numbers right here. 7 8/10 is larger than 7 7/10. So that is why 7 8/10 is one number to the right. And when you're looking at when you're looking at decimals, you compare the numbers in order from right to left. So we have a 7 here and a 7 here, so they'd be considered the same value. Then we move to the next number, we have an 8 here and a 7 here. So this would be a larger number. And when you're doing a negative, it would be the opposite. All right, so go ahead, make sure you pause the video and check your work. And if you made a mistake, it's your job to determine what the mistake is by using my examples or asking me a question.